Hi there, my name's Don McGlynn and I'm the producer and director of the movie Ed Thigpen, Master of Time, Rhythm, and Taste. In today's podcast, you're going to be hearing a lot of Ed Thigpen's personal history. A lot of people probably know this already, but there's a famous drummer named Ben Thigpen who was with the Andy Kirk Band. And his mother early on was traveling with the band, but then they finally sort of settled down and she was raising Ed, but they ended up getting divorced, and she moved to Los Angeles, and but she couldn't really afford to have a house to work in. She was working as a domestic, and this is a very, very sad story, which I will not outline here, and you'll hear in the podcast. But one of the great things about Ed's youth, when he was in this sort of the home, you know, there's a lot of religious schooling in this home, was he sort of saw that sort of thriving, burgeoning, multicultural scene on Central Avenue. He also learned how to play music in the school band. There were a lot of great people there at the same time, people like Dexter Gordon and Chico Hamilton. I'm not going to say the end of the story about his mother. It's very heartbreaking and sad, but you will hear it in the podcast. But directly after that, you will hear about Ed's early career, playing with a variety of people. And there will be some comments from Billy Taylor and Peter Levinson. And most importantly, you'll be hearing from Karsten Dale, his pianist for a long time. Karsten was very fond of Bud Powell, and Ed actually played with Bud Powell, and you'll hear about that. And then at the very end of this section, you're going to hear Message from Bud, which was a song that Karsten Dale wrote honoring Bud. And of course, with Ed having such a personal experience playing with Bud, it's a very special number. So we've seen a little bit about what Ed's life is like these days, and now's a good time to step back and see what his history is. Ed's story is about an ongoing lineage. It's about a musical heritage, and it's about a personal history.
My father, he was a gentleman. He was a man who was respected by his peers. He was respected by men as well as women. He was a great drummer, could swing. He could really swing. Andy Kirk, 12 Clouds of Joy, was stationed in Kansas City. My dad and mom, from what I understand from them both, met when she was young, and he was on the road traveling through. I guess she went to a dance or something, and he saw this young lady, and they got together. Got married, and consequently, I was conceived. She traveled with him, and it was time for me to be delivered. We were in Chicago. He had relatives there, and the band was playing Chicago a lot. And I was born there. That was during the Depression. It was 1930. And 31. I was born in December 1930. And when I was old enough to travel, you know, he brought it back to Kansas City. I do remember being around 3 years old when you're in a crib, 2 years old, and hearing the trains go back in the background. I remember playing stickball behind the house with a little carnation can and a stick. I don't remember going hungry for anything. The good Lord allows us to see the purity and the good in things. But if parents, it's not about how much money they have. If they show them love and time, and then you have other children in the neighborhood to play with, they're going to seek the good time, because that's what they're about. Children are about having fun. Well, by the time I'm 4 years old, next thing I know, I'm on a train with my mom, and we're going to California. She and my dad had split up, and that's why she moved to California. I was told she didn't want me brought up in the South. She wanted me brought up where it wasn't so much racial stuff. My mother had to do some work, domestic work, and as usual at that time, black women, they had this, the only work was available would be taking care of somebody else's house, but you couldn't have your kids with you, and there was no place nobody to take care of me. And so she evidently was recommended this home not a foster home, but there was sort of a foster home for kids who had been in trouble or juvenile, runaway, or whatever the case might be. I was 5 years old. In the boarding home, there were some good aspects. The fact that it was a Christian home, we had to go to Sunday school, and we had Christian ethic. And it was during that period that I learned about the spiritual family. The Christian ethic was very important. The idea of forgiveness, not necessarily forgetting, but being able to forgive one another. My mom, oh, well, she was off once a month at first, or once every 2 weeks. It would vary. And then she would come by the home to check me out. It was always nice because she had a very special way of rubbing your hair, putting the, massaging it, and the touch, a warmth that, I never forget it. And when love is involved, genuine love is involved, and the spiritual feeling or this bond is something that is unexplainable. I don't think you can put words to it. It's something that sits here. At the same time, that connection was so strong each time that it carried me through until the next time. And that's very important because there were a lot of times I wasn't necessarily happy, but I was able to persevere, to give you the strength to make it. Up and down Central Avenue. And you had the setting of the people, the lifestyle, the pool room, the barber shop, the things you heard there, the guy at the paper corner, the whole atmosphere, just the atmosphere, man, was swing. It was a lifestyle. And your spirituality played a part. The demons played a part. Then when I got to high school, we had a swing band. And the swing band had what we had called stock arrangements, the big band, swing band things. We had a wonderful teacher there, Mr. Samuel Brown. Dexter Gordon, 10 years before, had gone to that school. Chico Hamilton, who helped me a great deal, was ahead of me by 5 years or 6 years or something. Every weekend were house parties, or you went to the YMCA, they had dances. The audience came in because they liked what you did. You made them feel good. They had a nice time. And rhythm and blues was the dominant music in the African American or Negro community. That and gospel. At the end of high school, by that time, it's becoming some bebop is creeping in. But it was the life. It was the life, and the background was the music. I liked being downtown. Broadway was wonderful. You had all the shows. You had the theater, the $1 Million. You had stage shows at the Orpheum and the Paramount. I worked at the theaters, as a porter and or dishwasher, not just at theaters but restaurants. But I could see all kinds of bands and all kinds of vaudeville and shows and great movies. I'm sort of a product of Hollywood. I believed in the American milieu, of what you see, fairness of play and all this kind of stuff. My dad came in every so many years with the Andy Kirk Band. My mama always said to me, whatever it was with us, that meaning my father and her, had nothing to do with me. He was a good man. And when he would come to California, which wasn't very often, she would send me to the theater wherever they were playing, asking for nothing, but send me, make sure that I got to see him. During the Second World War, when defense jobs opened up, well, she was still a domestic until for most of the war. By the end of the war, she was able to get a job at Lockheed, consequently find a small 2-room apartment. She said, you can come, I've got a place now, you can come live with me. I lived with her about 8 months through that summer. And by the end of that first summer, she had a nervous breakdown, and they committed her. In those days, if you had a nervous breakdown, they'd just put you someplace. I got to see her once. I went to this hospital, and I saw her, and they had her, what I remember now, is tied up. I guess it was a jacket of some kind. And then they said, you can't come here anymore. And they didn't let me come and see her anymore. So I had to move back to the boarding home. You know, it became sort of like a war in the state again. I was still going to high school. I got in the swing band, and we were giving a concert. And I got a notice to come back to the house. And when I was walking down 48th Street and coming close to the house, I saw Mrs. McAfee, who was a matron of the house. And she was in tears and everything, because they loved my mom. She was a good woman, boy. She was a wonderful woman. She was crying, and she said that my mom has died. And that's all I knew. But strange. This is the second time I ever felt this way. Well, something. You can stop that for a minute. You know, we had to take a little pause there. That's okay. That's the first time I've felt that deep about what losing her meant to me. But something even out of that comes important things. Decisions have to be made. One I did make. If I ever had children, I would never abandon them. Nothing can take the place of that kind of love that a mother gives to a child. And I never always said to myself then, I wanted my children to feel that in some capacity, that I will always be there for them. It's so important. His new wife at that time, they had offered to have me come to New York. I had said no to that. I wanted to finish school out there. I'd been going to school all that time. I wanted to finish my education. You know, I was green, didn't know anything, and I met this older woman. Next thing I knew, I'm hanging out all night. Had my first experience of drinking, you know, and going to live with this person. And that was against my basic beliefs. I very quietly wrote a letter, and they sent me the ticket, and I very quietly got out of it. He was there when I was ready, so we had to get to know each other when I got to St. Louis. One of the key things he said to me one night, you don't owe me anything except respect, and only that if I deserve it. And it sort of freed me up. And the musical environment in St. Louis was dynamite, man. The main thing he did was, it was just by playing. Then I really watched him play, you know. And somehow that's when it solidified the idea that I wanted to be a musician. Joe Jones was a big influence later. Huge, probably the most influential, because he was like a symphony on drums, you know, from brushes to sticks to hands to mallets to, it was everything I could ever dream about, all the colors coming out of the drum set, the showmanship, the flash, but the big smile and swing. Oh boy, could he swing. And I tried to imagine the sound and let it come through my hands with the brushes or whatever it was, how to duplicate that feel and that sound. So I developed swing as far as that touch from listening to him. And then later on there would be other people that would be added on. Anyone who could play, I was like on top of it, to find out what they were doing, how I could add it to my playing. And that's when it really started happening. I was with Cootie Williams, and we went out with Dinah Washington, the Orioles, the first doo-wop groups, Dominoes, down south, all the Chitlin Circuit. And after that, you know, it was the Army, and coming out and joined Dinah again, then Johnny Hodges, then back to New York. I was with Bud Powell for a few months.
I met Ed at intermission, and then afterwards, that's where we first met. and that would be a place called Cabell Hall at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia, November 1955. By this time, Bud Powell was on the verge of insanity.
Nobody could communicate with this is after he had been beaten by the police, and his head was never right, and he was in and out, and so it was difficult for anyone who worked with him.
But playing with Bud, he wasn't at his top shape, from what I'm told. But for me, it was a wonderful experience just to, even though I didn't understand everything he was doing from bebop's standpoint, being a bebop drummer, I was a swing drummer.
And I saw that he was very much at home with him, and he didn't have the experience, obviously, that Bud had.
But Bud would look at me, he wouldn't say anything, he would just sort of grin.
Ed called most of the tunes. I mean, Bud would sit there and look at Ed. He knew all of Bud's tunes, and then they would start playing.
My stick playing wasn't that great. I mean, great and great, I could keep good time, but articulation, you know, on independence. So I remember one night we were on the road, and Bud said, play brushes, because he liked the way I played brushes. It was a wonderful experience, and I gained from it now. Just, it's inside.
You know, Bud is one of my big heroes. I mean, he is the beat in jazz on the piano, and it's so funky and it's so refreshing, alive. You know, it's like listening to Gould playing Bach or something.
Did you make any records with Bud? No.
Oh, there was a house party we played. There's a tape, but it's not a very good tape. Can't hardly hear anything.
I heard this song in a dream. I was sitting in the old Montmartre in Copenhagen and in the bar, and Bud Powell was playing. No, I was having a drink with Bud Powell, and there was a band playing. And you know, this song came up, and I woke up and oh shit, and I wrote it down. And I came to the rehearsal room with Ed, and he said, well, let's call it Message from Bud, because that's what it was.
Hey Boppers, Keon here, and you just heard the third part in our series on jazz drummer Ed Thigpen. We heard Ed talk a bit about his roots in early life and career, and in the next part we'll hear about the time he spent as one-third in one of the biggest jazz groups of the day, the Oscar Peterson Trio. These podcasts are called from the documentary Ed Thigpen, Master of Time, Rhythm, and Taste, directed by Don McGlynn, edited by Frank Axelson and Christian Mulkey-Litt, with sound by Thomas Martin. Bop is produced by Don McGlynn, co-produced by Mark Canner and Franny Alfano, and edited by me, Keon Vaziri. Until next time, thanks.